Hey everyone, John from Beyond ARTV. It's time for a very special episode of my Countdown Series 7 on Sunday. Special, I say, because it is Super Bowl Sunday, the day that I am posting this video, and we are talking about the 7 greatest Super Bowl halftime performances of all time. Asterisk, in my opinion. Let's get this out of the way now. Yes, I am wearing a Steelers jersey and beanie, and I'm holding a Carolina Panthers one in the other hand. These are my teams, and they are not in the Super Bowl. I'm a loser, and get it out of your system now. This episode is not about football, but it's about the entertainment that occurs during the halftime show. And if you watch my channel regularly, you know that I'm obviously dedicated to music, so that's what we're talking about today. Don't worry if you don't have any familiarity with the game of football. Although, to get technical for just a second, I do have to speculate and wonder why, if there's a position in football called Nickelback, have the Canadian multi-platinum award-winning band Nickelback not been offered a Super Bowl halftime performance with their many hits such as Rockstar, If Today Was Your Last Day, I'd Come For You, Savin' Me, Photograph, Rockstar. Jokes aside, we are going to be talking about the 7 greatest Super Bowl halftime shows of all time, at least in my opinion. Yes, there is personal bias with any list, but I watched every single Super Bowl halftime show from 1993 until 2017. And yes, it takes an entire day. It was a grueling task that did take some time, but I found it to be very rewarding at the same time because I got to see the culture change. I got to see how far we've come since the early days of the Super Bowl. The halftime performances originally focused on more of like a marching band type thing. We're not talking about any of those, Disney performances, anything like that. There were many of those. It wasn't until like 1993 that things really took off and the Super Bowl actually started getting big talents to start performing. Except the 2000 show, which I think most of us remember was very, very strange. We had the whole millennial thing that was narrated and we're into this new millennium here. And then Phil Collins came on and sang the Tarzan theme song. I did briefly want to shout out a couple of honorable mentions. I really did enjoy performances from the Rolling Stones, which maybe it wasn't the most electrifying thing in the world, but Mick Jagger definitely had a commanding stage presence there, and I love the stage in general. The design was insane. Over 600 pieces assembled so quickly. All the people, just shout out to you if you made that possible with our whole logo, the mouth and the tongue and everything. That came together very rapidly, and it was just kind of unbelievable before my eyes. I loved Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. They definitely had the crowd roaring to life. Even if I'm not the biggest Bruce fan, I can definitely appreciate and respect it. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, especially at this point since Tom Petty has passed on, definitely wanted to give a mention to that one. And even more recent performances like the Madonna show that was assisted by Nicki Minaj, MIA, other artists. It was pretty cool, even though it did seem like a bit of a grab at relevancy, which she doesn't really have anymore. Still pretty cool. And even Katy Perry with her Dancing Sharks. Those are my honorable mentions. Let's get on to the actual top 7. If you enjoy the video today, please leave a like on it. Here is the very first pick. Up first, we're talking about the 2003 Super Bowl halftime performance. No, not the 2004 one that I actually saw happen at church, ironically, because we were having a youth party and then the whole Justin Timberlake, Janet Jackson thing happens. Ironic that I was there. But no, we're talking about the 2003 performance from not only Shania Twain, but also the band No Doubt, which I'm a huge fan of, and also Sting of The Police. Now, these might sound like 3 odd names to put together on paper, but let me tell you, this was a very coherent performance. It was something that seamlessly flowed, and it started with Shania Twain. Now, if you're not familiar with her music, I don't know how you wouldn't be, but obviously she performed a couple of her hits like Man, I Feel Like a Woman, and Up. And she definitely had an effervescent glow to her, just the way that she came across so breezy on stage. I liked it. It flowed quite well, and the way that they made the songs, it obviously was made for the Super Bowl. These tracks are pre-recorded and that sort of thing. Most things aren't done live other than some live vocals, and some people have a problem with it. I personally don't, because I know that I'm going in looking for a show, a captivating performance, something that's going to linger in your mind and that your eyes are going to be attracted to. And with this show, they definitely were. Shania Twain killed it on stage. It then very smoothly moved over to No Doubt's performance. Gwen Stefani walks out on stage for an electrifying performance of Just a Girl. At that time, I knew who No Doubt were, kinda, sorta, not really. I had a cousin that was into them. them, and I think I had heard Just a Girl on like some sort of Now compilation or something like that. And in the early 2000s, I think a lot of young people looked up to No Doubt, and I know that I was one of the ones that had a little bit of a crush on Gwen Stefani, and that was just a performance to remember. I still enjoy going back to it. I actually had some fond memories when I watched this performance. Not only of that, just seeing them teaming up with Sting at the end of this for a rendition of Message in a Bottle. It was all great, and like I said, it flowed very well together. That's why it had to make my list. Maybe it wasn't the one that had the crowd singing along the most, but I think it was just great because they had people from all different backgrounds and they put them together and it worked. At number 6 on my list, we have something that screams the early 2000s. Aerosmith, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Mary J. Blige. This was huge. There were so many big names in the early 2000s. They were so popular. Aerosmith were riding the success of Jaded and I Don't Want to Miss a Thing that actually came out on the Armageddon soundtrack in '98. This was a huge time for them to capitalize on the success, and they did. Steven Tyler and company put on an electrifying performance, but they actually did not open up. NSYNC did, and they had a pre-recorded skit with Ben Stiller before. I thought it's actually still pretty funny to this day, and it's something where they came on stage as NSYNC, a boy band, and you might look at them and see their clothes as being super cheesy, the dance moves being ridiculous, but this was a time in music that was very, very different, and I love to look back on it just to see where our culture was at, but they did a great job entertaining the crowd. Obviously, the adoring fans were right there, and I think that they were pretty much on point with the vocals they were doing. It seemed like those were mostly done live, and then the way that they kind of played off of each other, switching back and forth seamlessly to Aerosmith, then back to NSYNC, and then bringing in Britney Spears for Walk This Way, an Aerosmith song. It was all really great, really entertaining, and it just grabbed everyone's attention. Justin Timberlake was, of course, a member of the boy band NSYNC, so he performed here. He performed as a solo artist in 2004, which was his questionable performance with Janet Jackson, and then he's performing and headlining the 2018 Super Bowl. So he's definitely come a long way, and I think that here he was pretty cool. I mean, he shot fireworks out of his hand. It doesn't get cooler than that. Number 5 is the 2002 Super Bowl halftime performance by U2. This was just months after the devastating 9/11 attacks in the United States. Our country really did band together, and it's something that I think that we really need a lot more of, not to get preachy, but honestly, the way our country responded that by uniting together, it was definitely something that can bring a tear to the eye, because I remember those times. I was old enough to remember, and this halftime performance here wasn't something that I saw live, but I did see it a few years afterwards, and now obviously rewatching through the archives for this video, and it was just electrifying. It was a moment that really struck a chord with so many people. You could tell that stakes were high. People were nervous, and this was something where they're performing a lot of their hits, like Where the Streets Have No Name, their short song MLK, which was essentially a prayer, a speech, and you saw all the names of the fallen soldiers, the fallen officers, the firefighters, just the people that lost their lives scrolling on the screen behind them, and the way that it kind of collapses right at the end. It's an emotionally tinged and charged performance. I think that Bono handled himself very, very well here. He seemed very much just like he was leading a big crowd in the right way, leading towards positivity, and then him opening his jacket and revealing the fact that he has the United States flag on the inside. Everyone was roaring and cheering there. It was definitely a Super Bowl to remember. At number 4, we have the late, great Michael Jackson and the Super Bowl performance that changed everything. It changed halftime shows for good. This was 1993 when Michael headlined, and this was the first show where it was really like they got a big relative artist and they performed a lot of their hits. Yes, he performed We Are the World with the children's choir and everything like that, but he was really doing a lot of his own songs. He obviously did Black or White, Billie Jean, and the way that he just opened up the set, it was suspenseful. It was tense. He just kind of glared around at the camera, and it was something that took a minute to get going, but once it did, he's moonwalking all over the place. He's showing off his moves. He's showing off his raw talent, and it's just something that really makes you smile. The King of Pop was out there in front of 100 million people watching, and obviously the people that were actually in the stadium watching as well, and he lit everybody up. You can hear the crowd going wild in the clips. It's just something that I think we've lost such a huge part of music with Michael, but I'm so glad that we have moments like this to look back to and cherish. I say he changed Super Bowl halftime performances because people were drawn to that. People were buzzing about that. I know that I was too young to experience that, but still, I know that it was something that people have even told me that are older than me, that they remember this performance, and they remember how excited people were about it. So the Super Bowl started in more years to come. They started to book more big acts like that, and it became what it is today. Number 3, the 2017 Super Bowl halftime show featuring Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is definitely a divisive artist, but one that I have always been a fan of. I've been a fan of Lady Gaga since 2008, and I've never looked back. It's hard to believe it's been a decade at this point. I got a lot of shit and flack for it back in the day, but I think a lot of people have come to see what a talented, Juilliard-trained artist that she actually is. She writes most of her own stuff, she plays a lot of instruments, and she has an incredible vocal range, and she pulled it off big time here. If you don't believe me, go watch just the isolated vocal track from the Super Bowl performance. This is live, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people thought that Lady Gaga was going to come in with some huge political statement or was just going to shake things up, but instead, she made a uniting performance that was almost unanimously acclaimed. Her vocals were on point. The medley of songs from Bad Romance, Just Dance, Poker Face, everything like that. It was excellent. The way that she drops in from the roof, it was great. And after a couple of lukewarm outings, not saying in recent years, but there had just been some flukes over the years, I wasn't even a huge fan looking back at the Coldplay performance. They didn't get enough showtime there, and they were coming out of that, and then obviously stuff like Bruno Mars, which he was good. I just don't think maybe he was quite ready for it yet. I'm not hating on his performance whatsoever, but it was just so great to see somebody get up there and just be genuinely entertaining. You've seen Lady Gaga in the past, but you had never seen her on her game like this. No pun intended.
Only wanna see you, see you. Can I play this guitar?
It's unfortunate, but this is now the third artist that I'm talking about that has since passed away since doing their Super Bowl halftime show. We have Tom Petty that I talked about in the honorable mentions, and then we had Michael Jackson, and now at number 2, we have Prince. Prince is a legendary performer that really just knew how to get the people going. It got everybody excited when it was announced that he was performing the 2007 halftime show, and he did his renditions in The Rain, which is only appropriate considering Purple Rain is one of his biggest and most well-known songs. His performance was pretty much universally acclaimed and loved. The fans loved it, the critics liked it, and I think that the people at the Super Bowl loved it as well, because he not only performed his own songs, but he also performed some covers like Best of You by the Foo Fighters and All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan. It was a great medley of songs, and his guitar was really lighting up all over the place. And the difference difference with Prince here, he was actually doing the majority of this live, or else he had made specific tracks just for this, and they were doing it in real time. So that was very unique. If you know anything about Prince, he was very, very particular about the way his art was handled. Most of his stuff can't even be found on YouTube just because of the scrutiny there, the way that he wanted it to be listened to and purchased and that sort of thing. So it's no surprise that the Prince Super Bowl halftime performance is kind of hard to find. Everyone held their breath as he danced and slid around this very slippery stage that was made even more slippery by the fact that it was pouring rain, especially as the performance went on. Even during Purple Rain, as he's shredding that guitar solo, he's just all over the place, and it showed you how passionate that Prince is. Even if you don't like all of his songs, you have to appreciate and respect the performer that Prince is and was and just always will be. He'll always be remembered for his songs and his performances. Finally, we have our number one pick, the best Super Bowl halftime performance of all time. It's Paul McCartney, the former member of the Beatles, the biggest band in the world, one of the most iconic of all time. You all know Beatles songs, or else Paul McCartney and the Wings songs, or just Paul's writing in general. You know it. And he gets out there and just is smiling, having such a good time. This was the 2005 halftime show. I watched this one at home because my parents were big Beatles fans, and I do remember traces of this, but it was even better going back to it. I teared up a couple times just because Paul really still had all of his voice at that point. Not saying that he doesn't in 2018, but it definitely has gotten weaker, obviously, rightfully so. He's older at this point. But in 2005, I think that was the perfect time to have him do the halftime performance. This is something where he comes in, obviously owns the crowd because pretty much every soul there was invested in the music. We have renditions of Drive My Car, Get Back, and even some of the solo stuff, and it's all lighting everyone up. The crowd is going crazy. Paul is smiling. He's all over the place on the guitar and the piano and everything like that, and you can see that he's having just as much fun as the crowd is. As the set goes on, things just keep getting better. Live and Let Die, which was Paul McCartney and the Wings, he was out there giving it 110%. It's like the intensity and the tempo picked up. The pianos were just a driving force. The guitars were loud, and everybody was just going crazy, jumping up and down. And then obviously Hey Jude closing things out. People are singing along at the top of their lungs. Everybody's having fun. And it's just one of those moments in history where you can look back and it's a night where people were talking about it, just forgetting their worries and singing along. Na, 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 na. And he's doing even the call and response thing with the crowd. It's not something where you typically see the Super Bowl halftime performance interacting with the crowd so much, but he did it, Bruce Springsteen did it, and it's an incredible thing. What do you think about my list of the best Super Bowl halftime performances of all time? Let me know in the comments section down below. Let me know what your favorite performances of all time are, and please drop a like on the video and subscribe if you are brand new here. If you're able to support the channel, please donate on Patreon. It's this annotation over in the corner of the screen, or else the top link down below. You can pick up some merch too. It's the second link down there. If you would like to see last week's episode of 7 on Sunday, tap right here. Another recent video I did on the channel right over here, and all of my social media can be found linked in the description. Other than that, I'll see you very soon right here on Beyond ARTV.